Hello and welcome to the Gaggle, where we challenge and, if necessary, destroy media and narratives. I'm Peter Lavelle. These are a set of podcasts that the Gaggle is making, preparing for the final vote to be cast, if that's even going to happen, considering the way people are voting this year in the 2020 election. To hash this all out, we have Don DeBar, a good friend of the Gaggle, and of course we have George Szamuely. Don, you're an old political pro. Obviously, this election is unlike anything that we have had. What are your thoughts? Because as you and I have often thought about and considered, is that depending on the news outlet that you favor, that's going to be the opinion that you're going to get back to you. Okay, so there's a lot of conflicting views. How to believe the polls? If you don't believe the polls, you're not going to believe the outcome. Your thoughts?
Well, you characterized me correctly, at least as too old. Anyway, I don't know about the old political, whatever you said, but old. Um, we're watching basically warfare that is taking place. It's between two models, sort of the closing of the old in some ways, and like a glimpse at one of the possible news in another. Also, one might say between appearance and essence, or between appearance and material, or between real and virtual. If you look at the two campaign styles between Trump and Biden, for example, that are an expression of this battle that's going on. That's the part that's going to be expressed on Tuesday and over the last week or so. The essence of Biden's campaign is virtual. It's TV cameras with no one behind them. It's the sound of one hand clapping in a way, and it's encouraged basically by grassroots, quote unquote, very much more resembling perhaps AstroTurf grassroots social media organizing. Trump is out there glad handing, meeting 30,000 people at a time, 2 or 3 times a day. There's an entire universe that portrays what's happened in the last 4 years, called the media, the U.S. media. And by that measure, Trump has been a failure, the worst president in the history of the world. There is also the material. You can see it when he's going into these places in the Midwest where it did bring the jobs back. The people that didn't have jobs are at the rallies now because they have jobs and they're really enthusiastic. So you have like these two competing models under which you're going to see and we can get to this, I guess, the expression of some competing interests that have been banging each other's heads since, you'll remember, a couple days before the last election, you had me on Crosstalk. It was Hillary's Reckoning, I think it was called. And I said, look, after the election, you're still going to have these two. We all agreed on this, too. These two camps that are really hostile. If we don't end up in a civil war, we may be heading towards that. It looks like that may start Wednesday morning now.
Yep.
The way it's organized, I mean, there's heavy organizing going on the part of Biden supporters, that if Trump wins, quote unquote, and they don't call it that. If Trump steals it, which is what they mean if he wins, we don't let it go down. They're organizing groups for that, including some groups to take over Congress. Big money behind it too.
Yeah, well, that's it. And I do think that the stage is being set for some kind of an armed insurrection. I think what we saw in the United States earlier in the summer, triggered by the George Floyd protest, is what is being planned now for later this week, which is mass rioting in many of the cities, with the Democrat leaders of the cities and the states refusing to put an end to this disorder, and therefore, all claiming that Trump is trying to steal the election, and that the only way we can stop Trump stealing the election is via armed insurrection. And now this is where, yeah, go ahead, Don.
Let me just say why I agree with you totally. Let me just say why I think this is a really, really tone-deaf stupid idea for these. Number one,
well, it's dangerous.
If you, I think if the CIA, FBI, those 17 flavors of intelligence agency, and the media, and the people that own, all the high tech corporations, and the Democratic Party and the Republican Party institutions, and all the people that are behind Biden on the one hand, if they think they win that scenario, I have to ask them a couple questions. Number one, the rank and file police officers, how are they going to break? Because they have to enforce whatever decree you issue from the new legitimate White House, as it's declared in the media and whatever, wherever you guys hole up, and you say, okay, this is what you got to do. What police are you going to send in after Trump supporters? Second, in terms of the military, how many of those generals are going to be able to get the rank and file to start shooting Americans because Biden told them to? And then when it comes down in the street, you've got one group of people who've been sitting home playing video games for their whole life, and others that have been at the gun club. Okay, who do you think is going to win that battle? Well, I don't get it. I don't have a scenario where that puts Trump out and they're, they get regain control.
Yeah, but Don, just the way you phrased it, which is, I think that which makes it really scary, and I think George is agreeing, is that if Trump wins, he stole the election. Well, that's when you think of the predicate logic of that, I mean, it's kind of like Salem, if throwing a witch in the river, if she thinks she's not evil, if she rises, I mean. This is really terrifying here. What really bothers me is that, and George and I have talked about this endlessly about the polls, because people are very suspicious of the polls. As you might be well aware, Fox News had its 3 major programs on Sunday here prepping for the election, and essentially they are convincing, or have convinced their viewership, viewership, I might point out, is that Trump is on the road to winning. I mean, or at the very least, it's extremely close. It's really, really tight, and a lot of things could break his way. That's not what they're saying on MSNBC and CNN, and this is what I'm really worried about, because both sides, the two camps that you're talking about, is eyeing the other one to steal the election. That's not going to bode well, no matter what happens.
Well, that's why it's so important.
I'm sorry. Go ahead, George. Go ahead.
Yeah, okay, just briefly, that these opinion polls, that are being now published, which show Biden with a double-digit lead. Going into this, just with 24 hours to go before the election, they're having Biden with a double-digit lead. In other words, they're predicting Biden will win by a bigger margin than Obama defeated McCain, Obama defeated Romney. So therefore, if it doesn't happen, and it's not going to happen. I mean, even if Biden wins, it'll be a very close thing. So if it doesn't happen, then say Trump stole the election, and that's a classic color revolution scenario, or CIA coup scenario. You basically you're saying no, this person's he's going to lose, it's done. And when it doesn't happen, he's trying to steal the election. Get the people out onto the street to get.
So what you're saying, George, and I'm going to throw it over to Don. What you both are saying is that for half the electorate, the person deemed the winner is going to be it's going to be an American version of Juan Guaido.
Yes. Yes.
When you have a situation where the institutions have lost credibility, you find yourself in a scenario. And people create that condition because they can manipulate it. You mentioned Fox is showing this other side that Trump is even and in the game or whatever. Let's imagine a scenario for a moment where Trump is actually winning by 10 points. And what we're doing is we're seeing Fox making a concession to reality on behalf of the same parties that the other networks whose narrative they're selling, so that in the next stage, when it's very close, and someone says, and the officials, quote unquote, whoever they might be, say that this is really what happened, Fox will sell it as a reasonable voice, and a part of Trump supporters will say, yeah, well, they're being objective. They were objective before. They showed that he was in the game. It wasn't crazy like CNN, etc. I had to remind someone of that kind of scenario. I mean, we're talking about, these entities are public relations entities, okay? They are not, scientific, data generators that are out looking at, everything that goes on in the world and then kind of reporting it to us in a condensed form that we can absorb. They pick stuff to talk about, and then they discuss it in a way that's been vetted all the way through the senior executives at the news division down to the lowest, lighting person, that this is the story, and shut up about anything else. When they come back with, even in a newspaper like Pittsburgh that endorsed Trump yesterday for the first time for a Republican in 50 or 100 years or something, it's partly a concession to the acknowledgement on the ground that Trump is winning in Pittsburgh and in that area, and that there's no way, no matter what these guys said, that they'd be able to sell anything different to their audience.
That's just the point.
So now it's a matter of how else do you manipulate them? And so you have to first catch their ear and talk their language, and now you tell them what you want.
What's happening here, that's really what's happening right now. Okay. I mean, George, you and I discussed this a lot here, and and we actually looked forward to watching Fox's coverage because it's they usually don't. Monday's a pretty dry day when it comes to watching cable for us because we live so far away. But do you think that's the message that Fox was sending? Because rally after rally after rally in these battleground states, okay. Extraordinary. And of course, and it's Fox, we're being objective and looking at how they see the world and basically claiming, which I think you probably got a good chuckle out of it as I did. You had tens of thousands of people greeting Trump, they're claiming that 25% of them either didn't vote before or they were Democrats. And then the juxtaposition is that, and then there's Joe Biden barking at 7 cars. It's an optical, strategy here. But what I'm looking at is that, the Fox viewers will say, yeah, look, there's the enthusiasm. I think even the left admits that Trump has the enthusiasm element. He has the wind to his back. It doesn't mean, objectively speaking, it doesn't mean he's winning. Okay, do you see what I'm getting at, George?
Right.
My lying eyes. That's what they're going to tell you. Go ahead.
Well, that's right. And the other networks are maintaining the line that yes, of course, Trump has his uneducated, uncouth deplorables who come out to his rallies and yell and scream and do the fascist salute in celebration of their leader. But the real the support in the country belongs to Biden. And so they are, what the media, the rest of the media doing is gearing the public up for an inevitable Biden victory. And that's why, if it doesn't happen, then they will be ready. It's like the stories have already been written. Those stories, Trump is stealing the election. You can bet, Wednesday, those stories will run. They've been drafted and they're ready to run. First thing on Wednesday, Trump stealing the election. The people have to rise up and stop Trump from doing it. And so I think that's really the crucial situation. And as for Fox, there is a difference between most of Fox's coverage as opposed to the 3 opinion shows on prime time. Because yes, Tucker Carlson, Sean Hannity, Laura Ingraham, yes, they're absolutely saying what you were saying. Most of the rest of it is pretty nondescript, that echoing most of what you see in the mainstream media. So, yes, those 3 opinion shows will try to mobilize the Trump base should the rioting start and so on. But the rest of the Fox coverage, I think, would be different.
The interesting thing for me is if you look at the major broadsheets and then the liberal cable stations, they are primarily the white suburbanites that the Democrat Party is targeting. It's circular, okay? Because they are representing their class interest. Oh, I'm saying the forbidden word in American politics, but it is class because they're protecting their class interests. These media companies, the vast majority of their employees are white suburbanites, or we can just even suburbanites. Okay, we don't have to have an ethnic element to it. But the party is appealing to that part of the constituency, and the part of that constituency is the media itself. Do you see how it's self-referential? Go ahead, Don.
If you think of class in the contemporary terminology, which is the 1% and the 99%, given the extreme concentration of wealth and poverty, then if you start looking at how that gets manifest in this electoral politics, you go back to reality and virtual, because you have, on the one hand, Trump, who was selected by his supporters. They voted for him. They carried petitions for him. They did all the work for him, and all the mortar in between the Mason work that was done to make that campaign happen, and got him elected. And they've been doing it, and he's been, talking to them the whole time, talking right over everybody else's head to them. And now they're out there again for him. They're turning out in the freezing cold and snow and everything for it. So those people are enthusiastic because he's the guy that they chose, and he's there. On the other hand, Biden was not chosen by the Democratic constituency. He was chosen by the process. He didn't win the primaries. He won the primary process through a whole bunch of maneuvering. He
was anointed.
I think it's a good point.
He was anointed. He was anointed. Okay, George, jump in.
I think yes. Important distinction that what happened in 2016 was that the Republican voters said, we don't want these leaders that you're thrusting upon us. We don't want Jeb Bush. We don't want Chris Christie and the rest of them. We want the person who represents us. And that's precisely what didn't happen in the 2020 primary process. Biden was thrust on the Democratic voters. They didn't want him. When they had a chance to, New Hampshire, Iowa, all those early voting places, they rejected him overwhelmingly. And then somehow Obama and the party leaders just thrust him and said, you will support him, and that's all there is to it. So that, yeah, okay, right. That's a very different process.
Can we amplify an additional point here? Is not only was Joe Biden thrust upon the electorate, but what about Kamala Harris, someone that dropped out very early? Yeah. I mean, she couldn't even face her own voters in her own state here. I think you both know where I'm going with this here. If we have if it comes to pass that Biden is inaugurated, I think we're going to be saying President Harris very, very early. But on the other hand, Don, on the other hand here, one of the things I never thought I would ever contemplate when it comes to American politics is not my president. And I mean, we have the first wave of that now. Depending on what happens tomorrow, there could be a lot of people. I'm not saying it will happen. I'm saying it's very possible a lot of people say, not my president. And we're in a very dangerous place when we hear some people say that. Go ahead, finish it up, Don.
Half the electorate, more or less, I'll use those numbers, says that the Republicans and everything that has anything to do with them and or Trump is illegitimate. And the other half says exactly the same thing about the Democrats and or Biden, you can get on the list, Schumer and Pelosi, etc., are illegitimate. That one group are fascists, the other group are communists or God knows what else from outer space. The one thing that I usually open with when I'm on foreign quote unquote media source for the first time explaining American politics to people in other countries, and that is the only time an American politician is telling the truth is when they call another American politician a crook, because they're almost always right.
George, you want any final thought?
Well, I think that we're in for a quite a tumultuous period, and you know, we have to be now ready for a very serious political crisis, because it is clear that the people who in 2016 refused to accept Donald Trump as president, who launched the Russiagate hoax, they're playing for keeps. Russia didn't play the role that we were expecting this time around. So there's going to be a new issue, and the new issue is Trump is stealing the election. And well, they're not just going to forget about it and say, "Oh well, okay, election's over." You know, just think of what they did for the last 4 years, and just multiply it by 10.
I'm thinking about what they did for the last 4 years, and you know what? I think this myth called Russiagate isn't a spent force. Unfortunately, it definitely will be employed. Every time we do something on the elections, I feel like we're ending on a pessimistic note. We'll see. Don DeBar, thank you very much, and of course George, my partner here at the Gaggle. If you like this, please like, share, and subscribe, and get a lot more ahead, even before the last vote is cast.